boils and ghouls. You are now tuned in to PVD Horror Podcast. Pleasant screams.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to PVD Horror. I'm Dave, and I'm here today with a local Rhode Island author who I'm very stoked to have on here, Christa Carmen, who is a Bram Stoker Award-winning author and two-time Shirley Jackson Award-nominated author of The Daughters of Black Island, Beneath the Poet's House, a slew of others, and also the upcoming How to Fake a Haunting, which Christa, October 7th, I believe, is the release date. Is that correct?
October 7th. That's correct.
Excellent. Christa, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Dave. I'm really excited to be here.
So, being a Rhode Island author, I feel, is that how you identify yourself as a Rhode Island author? Is that safe to say?
I think so, yeah. It's funny because if you asked me that question like 10, 11 years ago when I started publishing, I was like, no, of course not. I mean, I'm writing things set in Rhode Island now, but I'm going to branch out. And then I just sort of didn't. So, yeah. I think it's safe to say.
I think so, too. And I almost feel like it's a badge of honor to wear in many ways. And I don't know how familiar like people outside of our bubble over here are, but like the Rhode Island author community is actually pretty established, super, super talented. And it's just so rich with like different styles and genres, and just like the horror authors themselves are so uniquely different. It's just we're so lucky to have such a great community. And Christa, you being one of the voices in that community, or words in that community, I should say, is just another addition, and something. Your style is actually very unique as well.
Thank you. I so appreciate that, and I also so agree. I am, I'm part of like the Horror Writers Association, and I am friendly with so many other horror authors, and I love so many other horror authors. But at the same time, I would not want to be writing horror anywhere else.
Yeah.
I do love this community. I love everything about it. I love everything from like mining the area for things to write about, and then the writers here. I mean, it actually started as an HWA chapter. We had an Horror Writers Association chapter in Rhode Island that I had actually started right before COVID, and it sort of naturally morphed into just a more organic kind of grassroots group. And we call ourselves We Are Providence after the first anthology that we put out. And just to your point, I mean, it's so much fun hanging with these people, writing with these people, going to their events, because like you said, I mean, you can have, like the splatterpunk of Aaron Beauregard, or like the weird cosmic body feminist horror of Victoria Dalby.
Yeah.
Like and then I feel like super lucky to call those people friends as well. So
those were two individuals who immediately come up anytime I think of Rhode Island horror authors as well. And it's such an amazing group. I read an interview of yours recently, and I was kind of laughing to myself because your response to this question reminded me of what my response typically is, and it's about ghosts. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you're skeptical of ghosts, even though it seems like you're very fascinated by ghosts, based on the content of writing and some of your history, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But you kind of stated that you're skeptical mainly because you haven't experienced them. So that's kind of my answer anytime anyone asks as well. And I was just curious about what keeps you fascinated in ghosts. Oh, hold on.
Yes, I am absolutely fascinated by ghosts, and very much kind of like a sad want skeptic. Like, I'm like, I don't want to be a skeptic, but I am. I'm always like, I love going to haunted places, and I love going to cemeteries, and I love like exploring places where there's like mystery and supposed, energy or story. I love the concept of residual hauntings where like something happened in the past and it's not necessarily figures or ghosts with like volition. What am I trying to say? Like ghosts with like autonomy, but sort of ghosts or energies trapped in these places is a really fascinating concept for me. But yeah, I've just like never really experienced something that I could say beyond a shadow of a doubt was like a supernatural experience. And yet I say that, but like I also wonder if I'm so much of a skeptic that I even discount some things that like other people are. I mean, I had an experience just last week, and I don't want to share any personal details because it's not really my story, but like a very close family member of mine had a horrific, like very scary experience between like 2:45 and 4:45 in the morning.
Yeah.
And I was up during that. I woke up and I had a super amount of anxiety and like couldn't figure out why. And I'm not an anxious person. Like I don't typically, I know that's like kind of an asshole thing to say. People are like, oh, you're never anxious, poor you. But like I'm kind of not. But yeah, I woke up and was actually so anxious where I couldn't put my finger on why that I got up and I went into my office and I have a day job. I work in a pharmaceutical industry and I like did work for 2 hours because I was convinced that maybe I had messed something up during the day.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I didn't mess anything up. I didn't forget to do anything. I went back to bed and in the morning I found out that like during that exact time somebody, extremely close to me was undergoing this like horrific experience and I was like, huh. But then I was sort of like, like clearly just a coincidence. Like, I
Right.
don't know. Like the opening line of Christmas Carol where he's like, there's more undigested, whatever the line is. Like, it's like you're probably like a bit of undigested me as opposed to a supernatural experience. Like, I was like,
So
yeah,
if
I
you
must have
don't
just
see it,
been.
you're not going to believe it.
Yeah, that's kind of, yeah, it's kind of my
Mhm.
thing. And I'm also always fascinated to hear when other people have these like very concrete experiences because I just think the dichotomy of like, I just turned 40 this year. No problem saying it, but I just turned 40 this year. And it's like in 40 years, I have never had an experience that I could really put my finger on, like, yeah, this was ghostly. And then you can talk to somebody or read like a true like we've got, I'm going like this, like you can't actually see but I'm gesturing at like all of these like local legend kind of books, like
Yeah.
haunted this, haunted Rhode Island,
Right.
haunted Burlington, and you read about people's experiences and and I just wonder like is it maybe just that some people really are more of a conduit between this world and the spiritual
Yeah.
one? Or are they nuts? Or are they like just telling lies to like, I don't know, sell books or get attention? I just have never quite figured it out. And it does fascinate me.
See, I'm exactly in the same boat. And I feel, and it's funny because I think people assume certain things based on our interests, right? So I'm sure people assume that you're like, you believe in ghosts and, they'll tell you stories. Like people tell me stories about their experiences with ghosts as if I'm immediately supposed to just believe it because they're telling me.
Yeah.
And then they're always shocked when I'm like, yeah, probably not. Or I have some like explanation or some kind of like counter to it.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it is such a fascinating thought, though. And like, it starts to make you wonder, is my skepticism like the wall that prevents me from actually experiencing it? I,
Yeah.
I have, in my lineage somewhere, we did like the family trees thing. There's actually, and I was trying to remember the figure's name, but in like history, there was a family member that I had a blood relation to who was like, she died and there was like a ghost witness situation where she like came to someone's like um you know she said something about who her killer was or who like killed her
Oh,
to
wow.
someone, and they used that person's testimony as like a ghost witness thing. And I think it was like in Middletown or Newport or something like that. I can't remember exactly where it happened, but I'm still like, even with that, hearing that, I'm like, that's so silly to me. Like,
Right. Right.
but it is super fascinating. I love the world. I love like hearing these stories.
Yes. Yes. And you say like is the skepticism maybe a block? That's a funny, interesting begs to be explored more kind of statement because yeah, I don't know. I often say like I'm dying to be proven wrong, and like
Right.
no ghost seems to have taken that as a challenge thus far to
Yeah.
like but yeah. Yeah, I mean I've slept in the Lizzie Borden house. I got married at the Stanley Hotel. Spend a lot of time in the Exeter Cemetery where Mercy Brown is
Yeah.
buried. And yeah, just nothing. Whole lot of nothing.
Right. And so you are obviously very interested and have a lot of knowledge of like Rhode Island lore. And I was just curious if you just named Mercy Brown, but are there any other figures that you find super fascinating that maybe people aren't as familiar with? Because like Mercy Brown, I think is probably our most popular like lore figure, I would say. Who
I would
else
say so
are you
too.
interested in?
It also does fascinate me I'm just gonna beat that word to a bloody pulp, but I mean, this is why I write, right?
Yeah.
Because I like to explore things. It's weird so it feels like for every person that you would expect to know about Mercy Brown, there are still people. Like sometimes I'm at a convention or on a panel or something, and I feel like even if we're not necessarily in Rhode Island, I feel like we'll be close enough. We'll be still in New England, and
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I'm gonna say who here knows Mercy Brown, and everybody's gonna be like, duh, like move on. And I'll say it, and like nobody in the room raises
Right.
their, oh, you know where I just did it? That was fascinating. It was an sort of like an older woman's organization where it was like older readers, it was a lot of retired women that did
Yeah.
this organization. And when I asked the crowd, and they were more thriller readers than horror readers, but I still thought like you've been in Rhode Island, probably many of them, most
Right.
of their lives, and it was like a 300-person crowd and not a single person raised their hand. I think maybe one person like kind of in the front was like, I think I know that name. And I was like shocked to the point where I think I did a crappy, and I mean I can
Yeah.
tell that story like in the back of my hand, and I was like trying to relay it to a whole room of people that hadn't heard it. But yeah, other figures, I mean, a lot of people kind of think they know the story of the Conjuring house because they've seen the Conjuring
Yep.
movies, but that whole like the Bathsheba Sherman figure really had none of the backstory that was created by the Warrens and that was then rolled into the movie. Uh, Nothing, like didn't have a child that passed, didn't have any rumors of her being a witch during her lifetime, was a
Mm-hmm.
perfectly wonderful woman that never had a mark against her name. And then it's really sad that like she was turned into this figure long, long, long after her death, to the point where and this is wild to me too, because Mercy Brown's headstone has got, I mean, granted it's bolted
Yeah.
to the ground, but it still has been able to remain there. They had to remove Bathsheba Sherman's tombstone from the cemetery because people were going there and just defacing it.
Huh.
And so I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah.
And then another one is Dolly Cole. I did a short story about her, and she's very fascinating just because there's like three different legends that
Mm.
all have to do with this same woman. And it's just funny to see how these different, like they kind of start in the beginning and then like branch out. Like she's a vampire transvestite, she's a witch. I mean, it's cool to look up. You
Yeah.
can find some cool articles about her. Um, and then I guess just like one more, it's kind of just my other one that I would say is just it's like a wild card. It's like whatever I'm feeling in the moment. Like I usually have some sort of like new thing that I'm just interested in finding more about. Obviously, when I wrote Beneath the Poet's House, I was very into Sarah Helen Whitman as sort of a figure of Rhode Island's
Yeah.
history. And while she's not really a spooky legend, she was very cool in that she was very interested in spiritualism and in sort of trying to find a scientific proof of the afterlife. And a lot of that worked her way into her poetry and her relationship with Edgar Allan Poe. So, yeah, I think there's always kind of room for. I love when people bring new things to my attention. Like, oh, did you know, like this haunted stone wall in this little rural town in such and such?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes, tell me more.
Have you been to the cemetery? I believe it's in Smithfield, where there is like a tombstone kind of on like the woods line, and it's really hard to read the bottom of it, but it says something about a vampire's curse.
I haven't been there, but I've read about it and I've seen photos.
I went there. It was super hard to read, but you can make that out, and it's really like one of those mysteries of like what was it that that was trying to be communicated there. And I haven't done enough like digging on the backstory, but that one I found interesting. But another recent one I've been sharing with a lot of people, and I was wondering if you were familiar with the story at all. Rose Farron, Sweet Rose Farron, I think they call was her nickname. She was the first stigmata, I believe, in our area, or maybe even the US, if I remember correctly.
Do you
But
remember what town it was?
she's buried in Woonsocket at Precious Blood Cemetery. And it's really cool. If you visit there, they have a little pamphlet with photos of her like bandaged from the stigmata. She had like the, on her wrists, she had the wounds, and on her head.
I was gonna say, I thought maybe, again, gesturing to, this is like my research bookshelf up here, so I'm always like gesturing off camera to all these things. I was gonna say I thought that she was a chapter in one of those books up there, but then once you said all the rest of those details, I don't think I know about that. I'm gonna look more into it.
I always tell everyone, go visit her grave at Precious Blood Cemetery in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, because it is cool. It's there's like the informational booklet, and I think it's a piece of weird Rhode Island history that just never seems to end. Also, that cemetery, and this is kind of on tangent, but like that cemetery was victim of like flooding back in, I forget what the year was. My grandfather had told me it was like I'm trying to remember if it was, I'm going to say it incorrectly, but to the point where some of the bodies actually had risen out of the cemetery and were floating.
I did hear this. Yes, yeah. I have heard that, which is wild.
Because it's right next to the Blackstone River, which, as you can imagine, rises during storms like that, but it was pretty bad. So a lot of weird stuff in this area, which is great. And I think it's kind of what creates odd and creative and unique people too, right? And Rhode Island has a very rich artist community. I think people are drawn to this, but also the people who grow up in it, I think, have like that storytelling kind of within them, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So
everyone from like the fishermen down at the wharf to like the cemetery caretakers,
exactly,
to the people at the historical societies, to the farmers at the farm. Like, yeah, you can find there's always people willing to tell.
Everybody's got a story.
That's kind of like where Michael Bell first started out with Mercy Brown. He went to see her distant relative, cousin, how many times removed, and just had like a meeting with him in his kitchen and had no idea at that time what that was going to lead to, this whole kind of breaking open of the, New England vampire panic. Right. So yeah, very cool.
So just so our listeners can get a good idea, could you share a little bit about what your latest novel, How to Fake a Haunting, what like the plot line is for this book? And we're not going to give any spoilers, so nobody has to like turn this off before reading.
Right. No spoilers. So the book is about a woman named Lainey who is married to a man named Callum. And Callum is a horrible alcoholic, but he's one of those special breeds of alcoholic that like on paper is not an alcoholic, like no DUIs, has never done anything to anyone, holds down a job, but he makes her and her daughter's lives just completely miserable. And he has a very influential and well-connected family. And she just knows and has been threatened that if she tries to divorce him and get custody of her daughter, she will potentially, end up with the opposite hope and just not have custody of her daughter at all. So she's terrified of trying to divorce him. And she's got this crazy best friend named Adelaide. And they come up with this wild plan that they're going to stage a haunting in the house so well done and intense and slow and progressive so that it seems very realistic, to the point where it drives him insane and out of the house. And then, no spoilers, but like shenanigans ensue.
Yes. This is such an interesting plot line. It's like reverse of what, you might think of a horror like plot line starting off would be. And there's an interesting anecdote that you shared in an interview of how this idea kind of came about. Would you share that?
Yes, yes. So, my very lovely husband that, is certainly not an inspiration for Callum, but did it kind of inspire the book in that, we when you get annoyed at your spouse because or your partner or whoever, because you spend 25 minutes picking out a movie and they fall asleep. So and then like poor him, I pick on him, but he gets up at 4:30 in the morning to go to work. So we spent all this time picking out a movie and we decided on something that he wanted to watch. We turn it on and he falls asleep. And I was like, God damn it. So I like storm out of the room. Oh no, I took a picture of him sleeping because I was going to show it to him in the morning and be like, here's the timestamp. Like, look how quickly you fell asleep. And for whatever reason, I took this picture of him and then I was like, huh. And I texted it to myself. And then I went into the other room with my phone and I like stormed back into the living room making like a big, noise so that he would wake up. And I was like, what are you doing? Like, why did you just wake me up with this text? And he's like all disoriented and he's like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? And I like show him his phone and I'm like, what is this, a joke? Like you mocking the fact that you fell asleep during the movie that I like really, like something came over me. It must
Yeah.
have been like at that moment, I knew somewhere deep in my mind that this was like the springboard of like a whole new novel and like journey and this whole thing. Because I committed and I went very hard. And he basically got to the point after like several minutes of me being like, I'm not messing with you. He was like, well, if I didn't send this, which I didn't, like someone or something took a picture of me while I was sleeping and sent it to you. And then like I couldn't do it anymore and I
Yeah.
like lost it. But it just got me thinking, like, if you really like had a reason to hate someone or want them gone or want them out, I mean, you could really we think of stuff like, you could play practical jokes on your office mates, but
Right.
when you live with someone, you have such intimate knowledge of their habits and their fears and their everything that if you really wanted to like haunt the shit out of them, you like could do a lot of stuff with that. And then it just was off and running so fast.
That's a
Yeah,
pretty
it was a lot of
amazing
fun.
inspiration, like
Thank
that
you.
real life scenario. And if anyone is ever wondering what the definition of gaslighting is, that was it. That's
Yeah, and
it.
there's so much of it in this book.
Yes.
And I mean, there's like I try not to look at reviews and when it's this early on, you can't kind of help like people sometimes tag me in them and I see them here and there. And I have seen some reviews that are like, I really liked this. Like this was such a cool book and the writing, blah blah blah. But like I was really conflicted because like the character of Lainey, she's not really I don't like really like her and she's like very stubborn and bitter and angry and she does all these terrible things. And it's like, yeah, dude, do you think somebody that could commit to like a month-long haunting of their like of course she's not like a good person. It's
Right.
a lot of gray area there.
And it's interesting because that's actually kind of something I want to ask you about because like the setting, all right. So we're in wealthy Newport. There's mansions. There's these rich families who Callum happens to be part of. One of those, which kind of helps him, have the lifestyle he's having and be able to make mistakes, but they're easily kind of covered up or just ignored, right? How did you familiarize yourself with like this lifestyle or just like this world that you built, which is kind of something I could almost very much imagine being real in Rhode Island, in Newport? Yeah, because I mean, one thing that people outside of Rhode Island might not know is Rhode Island is very small. And as much as there's so many great things about it, one of the things that I think can be a struggle is it does help to know people. And if you know the right people, you can do a lot of things that other people can't. So there's so much like reality to this story that I like it definitely connected with me. Like, oh, these are people that like I hate, but also I can still empathize with her struggle of what she's
Yeah.
going through.
Well, that's good.
And
Yeah,
I didn't
so
hate her, by the way.
well, that's good too. I mean,
That
like
world.
it's a weird, yeah,
Yeah.
she's a very gray character.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I do think Rhode Island I mean, I think the best like answer to that question is like I grew up in Westerly and, very sort of like regular middle class kind of like
Hmm.
went to public school and, you know, uh, I worked at, places down in Mesquamaket where like the people from Watch Hill and Weekapaug would go. So I think you kind of can't really live. I mean, again, I kind of didn't finish that all the way through. I mean, I live in Westerly still, or again, I guess I should say I left for a while and came
Hmm.
back. But like, we've got Taylor Swift's giant mansion like next to the Ocean House where like a bunch of my friends from high school worked when I was in, like
Yeah.
we all like worked in those places.
Yeah.
But so yeah, and yeah, there's just kind of enough intersection between like the different lifestyles here. And even by virtue of it being Rhode Island, sometimes I do think we almost take advantage of, I mean, sorry, take for granted a lot of things that even if you're not super well off are still a huge privilege over what other people have experienced just because we are the ocean state. So
Yeah.
like I know a lot of people that growing up didn't necessarily have, tons and tons, but still like had tons of friends with boats or jet skis or like get to, you get to go to the beach. I mean, I grew up going to the beach that Taylor Swift's house is next to. That's like just where we went to the
Right.
beach. It used to be free back then. Like the parking
Yeah.
used to not be so insane. But yeah, so there you kind of just like I had
Yeah.
enough
You
like little glimpses to be
right.
like, yeah, I think this is how a family that can just do whatever the hell they want would
Yeah.
behave.
Yeah. You kind of rub elbows with everybody, like
Yeah.
almost every kind of person when you're in such a small state like this. So I can
Yeah, and I
understand
do
that.
have Lainey being like removed, like she did not grow up that way. She
Yeah.
thinks it's very strange that like Callum and his siblings get like something like they're what did I got to brush up on like the first chapter of my own book here. What was it that Callum's parents like leave to each one of the siblings when they either marry or come of a certain age? It's like either a boatload of cash,
Yeah.
a piece of property, or
Yes.
a piece of real estate.
Right.
So I
Exactly.
mean, that's
Yeah.
not something that like a lot of people I know can relate to. Like, yeah, get
And
just like a mansion or whatever.
not to stick up for Lainey either, but also like what the way I read it was this is someone who has so much pent up like resentment that it's actually like seeping through their pores in like the way that they're starting to view this community that they're unfortunately a part of,
Yeah, for
and they
sure.
benefit from, right? It's one of those things where it's interesting because like if you marry into wealth, you benefit from the wealth whether you like it or not, right?
Right, right.
It's hard for people to necessarily like have that empathy for you when you're better off at like once you get into that community too. But no, she just has so much resentment for the way that she's treated in her marriage, and that's definitely kind of seems to be that driving force, and you kind of can like almost feel what that would be like. And then there's a pretty early on situation that happens that's like, really gives you like the best glimpse of what Callum's character is, which is
Yeah. Well,
not good.
thank you. Weirdly, that scene was not in the first draft. It was like
Oh,
a lot of
okay.
like relaying through words. Every once in a while, this happens to me as
Yeah.
a writer, and I'm always like very embarrassed after the fact. Um, where it's like I do the telling and not showing. And then when on like a later draft, I'm like, wait, what are you doing? Like, why are you? So yeah, that scene weirdly was not in the first draft. And
Yeah.
now that it's in there, I'm like, the whole book doesn't really work without it.
But that's what that whole like editing process is
Right.
for, right? And
Right.
and that's such a great add-on to an acknowledgement on your end to say like, oh, I think it needs something that kind of explains this a little further. Like you don't want to handhold people or treat them like children, but you also
Right.
want to make sure that the point you're trying to get across is
Yeah.
clear. And I think that scene definitely doesn't leave anything like unsaid.
Thank you. It also felt cinematic and also like setting. This isn't really like I won't give too much. I don't want it to be a spoiler, but it is in like the second chapter at the same time. But there also is something to be said for like really wanting to put sort of a dramatic, spooky, fog-drenched
Yes. Yeah.
scene
Yeah.
set at the gate of Seaview Terrace because I
Right.
think it's such a underutilized. Like I hate that Seaview Terrace is privately owned and like not part of the Preservation Society of Newport County, so that you can't go in it because I'm
Yeah.
just dying to get
And I
inside
like
it.
how you added in your opinion about that in the novel.
Yeah,
Like you pretty
just
much said that in the
very
novel.
clear. It's even in the book.
No questions. So I wanted to also ask you just a little bit about like, so you had the situation with your husband that brought this idea on. How do you take an idea and then like how long does this whole process take for a writer or for you and your to take it from this idea to this longer plot line to then all these intricate details of characters and what this world, like how long does that whole process take, and like what how do you do that whole process?
Yeah, so it's a great question. It's a strange answer. In this case, it was being, what am I trying to say here? I was very much aware of the fact that I was already contracted for a book. So like
Okay.
I knew that whatever I was doing had to be like done relatively quickly. Normally, I guess I shouldn't say that. Like, normally I take my time. That's not really true. I still, if I have an idea, I definitely have to keep momentum going. So it's
Right.
not like I like get an idea and even if I wasn't on a contract to, have a deadline, I would like take a year just thinking about it. Like, I would still do these things pretty much in the same amount of time, maybe not quite as quickly. Uh, with that being said, this novel I've published two novels. I had another novel about Mercy Brown that unfortunately has not been published, but is what I got my literary agent with. And then I've written, God, one, two, three, four, and I've just finished another novel. I've written like, I don't know, 7, 8 novels. This was the hardest novel I've ever written. Something about, like you said, like these kind of
Yeah.
intricate little details and things. I think looking back, my problem was that I kept trying to make perfection happen linearly. Like I wanted, if I was at page 100, I wanted all 100 pages to be perfect instead of having, usually no matter what, I want like the first 30 pages to be like really, really solid because that'll be my foundation. But instead of like having 30 pages of a really solid foundation and then like 70 pages of shit, but like workable shit that I could like build off of,
Yeah.
I just kept obsessing over like making it perfect. And I know you haven't finished, but if you've read even most of it,
Yeah.
there was just too much going on in the back half where like it was dumb to waste like like stuff was ever changing in that final
Right.
draft, in that final like 1/3 of the second. Oh my God, I'm all over the place. My math in
You're
that
good. You're
final
good.
1/3 of the last half. Like, okay, I don't know what that means. Yeah, just like kind of like the climax through to the end.
Yeah.
So much came together, and looking back, it was like you should have just like why were you worried about the sentence level writing and like the prose and the metaphors and the pretty language when stuff in the plot was still changing? And I think to be honest with you, I think like it's easy for me to say that now, but I think at the time I was doing that on purpose because I was nervous about how robust the different plot lines were. And I was
Sure.
almost worried. I kind of felt like I had all these glass balls in the air and there was no way I was going to catch them. So I was like, well, I'm just going to keep them up there and maybe like shine them. If I shine them prettily,
Yeah.
like who can? But I was worried they were all going to crash. And luckily, I don't think they did. I mean, I don't know. People can decide that for themselves. But yeah, it was really, this one kind of like
It
threw me for
feels
some loops.
it really feels like it's special in the way that like it sounds like it was really important for it not just to have a unique and interesting storyline, but you also wanted it to sound the way that like it's representing this community that's like polished, right? Like the community itself is polished, so it's almost like the wording was polished, the
Yeah.
presentation was polished. There's a lot to it, and I think that is definitely communicated in when it's read. Like you read that and you're like, oh, the language is pretty, the storyline follows a certain way, but it's rough, but the individuals are rough around the edges.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's this polished finish, but then you learn that there's more to it than just the surface level, right? So it's almost like the wording is representative of this world in general, and I found that to be fascinating, something I picked up on kind of quickly,
I love that.
which
Thank
is
you.
something that you can kind of see in a lot of those communities, and so yeah, it sounds like it was a lot of work. It sounds like it definitely drove you crazy for a little bit, but
Yeah.
sounds like it
And
was worthwhile.
I'm really happy with like I I almost hesitate to like say how difficult it was because I don't want people to hear that and be like, "Oh, well, no wonder it's so terrible. She had such a
Oh,
like." I
jeez.
think I guess like I really don't care at the end.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously I would like people to
Right.
like it and readers to like it and
Yes.
people to enjoy it, but I was happy with where it ended up. I mean, I remember like writing I spent a lot of time writing in my local bookstore because at a certain point I had to just get out of the house because I would be like, you should see, I should take a picture of it and like put it on my social media. During the writing of this book, you should see my spice cabinet. I organized my spice cabinet because clearly that was like a thing that needed to happen instead of me like working. Because I
Right.
was like, this book is really difficult. Wow, look at how unorganized my spice cabinet is. I think I need all new containers. They're like labeled.
Oh,
Like somebody
yes.
saw my spice cabinet and they were like,
I relate to this
OCD?
avoidance
Like,
so
what
well.
is this? This is the weirdest thing I've ever. It's so organized that it like has
Yeah.
passed the line of ridiculousness. They're like, do you even use that, or is it like a museum exhibit? Like, what's happening with your spice? I'm like, oh no, that was just a lengthy, multi-day
Right.
procrastination technique.
Yes. I love it.
Um,
I relate
yeah,
to
and then
that significantly.
right? I mean,
Yes.
come on. But I also think the other thing, and I just thought about this when you were talking about like the polished language and like wanting different pieces of it to land. I think the other thing that I paid attention to in this book, and I hope this any listeners don't hear this and then be like, "Oh, well now I hate her first book," or I didn't spend a lot of if any time actively trying to make my first novel, The Daughters of Black Island, scary. And then with Beneath the Poet's House, there are certain scenes that I did pay attention to setting things up in a way that might potentially scare a reader, but it wasn't to scare the reader. It was because the plot line depended on
Mhm.
scare and
Okay.
fear, and it wasn't like I want to write a scary book. And I guess in a way, I mean, the title's How to Fake a Haunting. Like, yes, the characters were trying to make things scary, but I actually went into this like wanting to write scenes that would potentially scare a reader as well. I had a short story published, God, years ago now, and it was called Red Room. And it ended up in my short story collection. It was published originally by Unnerving and then also by Unnerving for my collection. And I love that story so much because it people wrote to me all the time telling me that it like freaked them the hell out and that it should like be a horror movie because it's so scary. And I remembered like but a lot of I don't say a lot of my stories, but many of my stories don't really require that
Yeah.
necessarily. Um, but I kind of found myself like falling back on skills that I knew I had, but had kind of had to like dust off a little
Sure.
bit. And I was like, I want to try to actively scare.
Yeah.
And that was fun, but also difficult because, you had to go over things over and over and over again. Like, should the language be tighter and punchier? Like, should this part drag a little bit so that there's more suspense? So yeah, that was like something else that I feel like was kind of.
And I think that's super valuable for people to hear. And I'm not a writer, so I'm kind of talking out of my ass, but like I do think that it's super important for writers or creators of any media or art to try to like push themselves when they're doing it, taking on a new project. Try to push yourself to do like different things, right? Or just get the most of yourself out of it or
Yeah,
into it, and
definitely.
try to vary it so it's not just creating the same thing because it's comfortable over and over and over. So it sounds like you were kind of pushing yourself to do something you knew you could do and maybe you hadn't done in recently, or you just felt kind of out of it hadn't been done in a while, so you're out of like it's just like Dusty, you said. So
Yeah.
yeah, good. I mean, good. I think that's great, and that's how you evolve and keep things fresh too for the readers. Now, Christa, can you tell people? Well, first of all, tell people where they can find you on social media and all that, but also tell people where they can access How to Fake a Haunting for that October 7th release.
Yeah, of course. So I have a website and it's just christacarmen.com. And I feel like many, if not all my things are on there right now. Like I have an events page on there. I've got like 20 in-person events for this
Awesome.
book over the next 2 months. So that's definitely the place to see that information. There's also like some fun pre-order incentives on my website right now. Like I'm doing some giveaways for the book a little bit early and also doing a giveaway for a Ouija board that my husband, this is another story we won't get into tonight. I think there's maybe a Substack that delves into it a little bit. If you want to join my Substack, I have that too. But my husband does not like Ouija boards, so I can't keep this in my house. So it's part of the giveaway. Um, and then, yeah, I'm on Facebook and Instagram and Blue Sky
Yeah.
and How to Fake a Haunting. Again, you could pre-order it off my website, and then otherwise it's just wherever you get your books. And it's
Okay.
also, I will just say this because I think the pre-order for this just went live recently, but it's also available as an audiobook with the wonderful Candace Fitzgerald narrating it, and she's just wonderful as
Awesome.
the narrator. So.
And you mentioned doing some in-person events. Are you doing any local to here?
I'm doing most everything local. I'm
Okay.
going to New York twice and Massachusetts a couple, but mostly Rhode Island. I've got, Heartleaf Books and
Great.
Inkfish Books and all the kind of usual haunts from
Okay.
Westerly up to.
All
It's
right.
so funny because people sometimes outside of Rhode Island are like, it's so weird to us that you do events at multiple places in Rhode Island. Like, aren't you, essentially they were like, aren't you like cannibalizing yourself? Like you're just going to, and I'm
Right.
like,
Right.
oh, you're so cute. Do you think if somebody lives in Westerly, they're gonna like drive to
Yeah.
Wakefield? Like
They
they're
don't
not
know.
gonna.
They don't know like the 20-minute rule. If it's more than 20 minutes, we
Right.
don't do it.
Exactly. And I'm like, no. Going from one town to the next
Yeah.
in bookstores is like going to another state. I might as well go to Texas.
Right. I'm in northern Rhode Island, and I didn't go past Providence for like the longest time when I was growing
Yep.
up until like I had to. But yeah, it's a funny dynamic here.
Yes.
Krista, actually, I'm gonna stay in contact with you because we got some in-person stuff that I want to see if you're open to. So I'll ask you about
Oh,
that off
cool.
air. But
Sounds great.
everybody, make sure you check out How to Fake a Haunting when you get a chance. October 7th will be out. Check out our website so you can get access to it and maybe even do one of the in-person meetings so you can get to pick her brain a little bit. And also, as she alluded to, I haven't finished the novel yet, so I will also be doing a review in the upcoming weeks. So stay tuned for that. And Krista, thank you so much for joining me. This was an absolute
Thank
pleasure.
you. This
Thank
is
you.
wonderful. Thanks so much.
No problem. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. We will see you next week with a new episode. Have a good one. See you later.
Game over. You lose.